Therefore judge nothing before the time, until the Lord come, who both will bring to light the hidden things of darkness, and will make manifest the counsels of the hearts, and then shall every man have praise of God. Well, welcome again to another Wednesday night Bible study from Ferry Baptist Church. I am your pastor, Raymond Steinkamp, and it is June the 17th, 2020, and we are still under the COVID stuff. We are holding our Sunday morning services at 11 a.m., so put that on your calendar there, and do keep in mind we are practicing the social distancing. Please wear a mask. Please sanitize your hands. And for goodness sake, if you are sick or having symptoms, please stay at home. We did video and post our last service, at least the sermon part of the service. And it's on Facebook as well as YouTube, so you can look it up. You can look to our channel, either search Ferry Baptist Church or Raymond Steinkamp, and you should be able to find us and subscribe to us and get any of the sermons that we upload. And tonight, I have one that I'm going to try to heed the advice of that verse right there that we just read, that judge not anything before its time. And we need to be careful about that in the days that we live in today. We're going to be talking about the Rayshard Brooks shooting that took place over the weekend, and keep in mind that took place in Atlanta, and the Wendy's was burned down, as well as the two officers have been charged with various charges. I think upwards of 11 different charges in this, and the one that did the actual shooting, I think, is charged with felony murder, and we're going to talk a little bit more about that and maybe what that means. And but was this shooting just? Now, of course, as always, we've got to talk about the narrative that's being spun by the liberal media. Always got to talk about that narrative. It was very amazing to me, some of the things that I read today. They just portray this man as just a wholesome family man who, one even went as far as to state that the man just fell asleep in the Wendy's parking lot and wound up being shot dead by the police. And what an injustice that was. And we have to start looking at the facts of these things. The district attorney said he charged the officer with felony murder because Rayshard Brooks showed no signs of threat to the police officers whatsoever. And so let's start sorting through a little bit of the truth here and the real facts about these things. And yes, I'm going to restrain from some of the things that I wanted to mention because I haven't been able to find them from verifiable sources. So therefore, I don't want to judge anything before it's time. But what does it mean here, the narrative that we're talking about here? First of all, what are the facts of this case here? What is really what took place there? And I hope you've taken the time to watch the video. There's one that's about a 43-minute encounter between Rayshard Brooks and the police officers, and or at least the first one, and then the one that was called in to do the sobriety test there at Wendy's. And what had taken place was there was a car there in Wendy's in the drive-thru that was blocking the drive-thru, and the person inside apparently appeared to be asleep. So they called the police there. The police had a difficult time arousing the driver there, and then asked him to park in a parking spot to get out of the way of the traffic. And then the officer goes back to his cruiser and then had to come back because the man passed out again. And the man was not just asleep in the car, he was passed out due to intoxication. Matter of fact, even after the 43 minutes or approximately the 40 or 38 minutes encounter with the police officers there, he still blew a .108, which is well above the legal limit to be driving. And everybody says, well, they should have just let him park his car and walked home. But the problem with that is do they do that for everyone else? I mean, the rest of us, if we get caught on the road drinking and driving, and we blow a .108, we're going to jail. Why should this person get preferential treatment in this just because of the color of your skin. That's what I consider true racism there. You're actually belittling a people, saying they have to be given special accommodations because they're less than everybody else. They should not be held as accountable as everyone else should. But that's just one aspect of it. The man was not just merely asleep, he was intoxicated, and he was passed out. And then he failed the field sobriety test, and as well as he failed the breathalyzer test that was given to him. But then we carry on to say, well, now the DA charged him because he showed no threat to the police officers, even though he wrestled two of them to the ground, threw one of them, took the taser away from one of them after being tased, and then as he ran away, he turned and aimed the taser and fired it at the police officer, and that's when the police officer returned fire with a couple of shots from his gun there in that. So obviously he does pose a threat, and this is the thing that we're not as much aware of, is the criminal record of Rayshard Brooks there. What was his criminal record in all of this? Unconfirmed sources say that he had a criminal record, and so therefore he was on parole and would have went back to prison if he was caught DUI and resisting arrest to the police. So yes, he would have posed a threat to anyone else around because he would be looking to get away from the police at the time. And this, so we see all of this, and then, like I said, that's from an unconfirmed source about the criminal record, and I don't want to comment a lot on that because I don't have it confirmed, so I don't want to judge something before it's time, but just the evidence that we see, to see that the police officers are charged with this, and charged with murder, and it does infuriate me because I look at this and I say, wow, what an injustice that really has become, what it really is to go out on a call, something important like that, serving the public, and then being charged with murder, as if the intent that you had when you went on the call was to kill somebody. And that is where I find a big problem comes in there, because nowhere in this video do we see the intent of the police officers to kill this man. They tried to give him every break there was available, and he didn't take it. He began to fight with the police officers in this, and I find that so distasteful in this, but that's the narrative that is spun by the liberal news circuit there, and it's just one that we need to confront with the truth. And it's not a matter of anyone's race, it's not a matter of hating anyone, it is a matter of justice. And we want to talk a little bit about this justice, because the black community acts as if they're the only ones that have ever faced any kind of injustices. I've got news for you. I have first-hand knowledge to injustices that happen not just to black people, but to white people as well. People who have been arrested for things that they did not do. People have been set up and framed by the police. Police officers that used to sell drugs many years ago. Others that were teenagers and poor as well, who were charged with crimes that they did not commit, but because they could not afford a lawyer, the police knew they had them, and they knew that they would get an easy conviction off this. I know one man who built a career off of that, and it was several people that I knew in this that were charged, their lives ruined, have records that follow them the rest of their life there and all. So we see there are injustices that happen to all kinds of people. And in this case of Rayshard Brooks there, this was not such an injustice here that took place. Those police officers went by the book, and as one professional said about this, it was lawful and it was awful. It is lawful what they did, and it is awful that it had to take place. But what would have happened if he had not fought with the cops? If he did not resist arrest? If he just took it like a man and was arrested and was booked in, nothing further would have happened out of all of this. This is the big thing. You should not be fighting with the police. Where to fight the police is in the courtroom there. That's where the battle needs to take place there, of whether or not you're guilty of the crime that you have been accused of there. And it's so sad when we see these things take place, and it's going to get to where we're not going to have police, and then we're not going to have law and order. And you want to talk about injustices, you're going to see some injustices there where everybody is armed and people are shooting one another, and the police aren't going to come. Because why? If things go wrong and public opinion turns against them, then they're going to get charged with crimes that's going to ruin their lives, going to ruin their family, going to ruin their careers, it's going to ruin everything, all because of other criminals that are truly criminals out here committing criminal acts, but because of public opinion there. And we have to understand this charging of the police officers there in Atlanta is absolutely nothing but politically motivated. That's all that it is about. That's all. If people were not protesting, if people were not up there saying anything about this, if the liberal news wasn't involved in this, those police officers would be investigated by the GBI and Internal Affairs, and they would have been found fully justified in the actions that they took there. And then, of course, they want to bring up the disciplinary action of a record of the police officer there and all. Well, that's all fine and good and well. So now let's bring up the criminal record of Rayshard Brooks there. Let's bring that into light there. If it plays into light with the police officers, then it needs to play in also on the other hand. Or do we not want to do that? We don't want to do that because it doesn't fit a narrative that we want to portray out here. First of all, that people of color are being held down and held back because of basically police and all other white people. And we just got to battle this and confront it with the truth. And we want to do like the Apostle Paul told us as Christians today here. Now, our battle is not with flesh and blood. We don't war with flesh and blood. People are not our enemies. It's powers and principalities and spiritual wickedness in high places. And that's what we're seeing here in America. What we're seeing is a secular society, a secular culture here trying to do something about evil in this world, but in their viewpoint there's no such thing as evil except for what they make up to be evil or what they want to be evil. But you cannot have no set standard of evil because it changes. And always keep in mind, when you're talking to someone of a liberal persuasion, or you're talking to someone who are a part of these political movements, the words that they use do not always mean what you take them to mean. Like I always warn you and remind you, define your terms. Anytime someone talks about it, when they talk about racism, you got to say define what you're talking about. We understand racism as hating someone because of the color of their skin. They define racism there as anything that is in opposition to myself that I perceive as holding me back. That's racist. I can blame somebody else and I can blame racism. Give me free stuff. And that is not what racism means. That's never been what racism is. And in this culture today, we're really falling apart. We really are. Words don't have meaning. People go on feeling rather than facts. They're all worried about how somebody feels about something. And do we feel bad about this? Absolutely. We don't want to hear about anyone being shot and being killed. But we don't want to hear about our police officers being shot and killed and assaulted in many different ways. That's truly an injustice there. Those that are there to serve and protect us. And yes, you're going to find some bad apples here and there. You find them, and that's why we have policies and laws in place that when you find them, yes, you prosecute them. And but the thing that I see that what is happening in the secular culture is they're doing everything they can to squash what they feel is evil. The problem is they're addressing it from the wrong end. They're addressing it at an area that's not going to work there, and they're trying to pressure people into doing what's right, and they're never going to do it. And the problem is starting with who man is. What is in man? If you are not a person that believes in the corruption of the heart of man there, that total depravity that we talk about there in the tulip there and all, if you can't look out here in this culture and see the total depravity of man, if you want to know why these riots are taking place, why these injustices are taking place, why we see our police officers under fire, and why we see people murdering them and burning down Wendy's and places such as this, you see the depravity in the heart of man. Even when they're going out to try to say, hey, I'm trying to do something right for someone, they do things that are evil, more wicked than what they're accusing the police officers of doing there. And we see this, and we see the depravity of the heart of man there, and it's in his heart there. The depravity, the corruption, the Bible talks about it there. We are of our father Adam there, and we will do his works, and he is a fallen creature, and we are fallen creatures. And you see, this is why it takes God, and I want us as Christians to take a little hope in this. God is letting people see the depravity in the hearts of men and women today. Not only in their sexual perversion, but also in their violence and their hatred for one another. And it's just amazing to me that the one side that talks about how someone is being hated, it is okay for them to hate others that disagree with them. And I don't understand this. There's this double standard that goes here. If you're on their side, you can hate, but if you're on the other side, then you better not say anything that even sounds hateful. Even this video will be accused of being hateful and being racist and things. And I know pastors today who, if they was to see this video, say they would jump on the bandwagon for the sake of popularity, for the sake of political correctness, and they would say, you see, those pastors are racist. We're not, come over here and follow us. And that's what it all boils down to. You coming following them rather than dealing with the truth. And then of course we have people today who are just mixed up with feelings. For some reason they think feelings are facts, and feelings are not facts. Your feelings will change. Your feelings will change 5 years from now. You won't feel the same way about this incident that you do today. You won't feel the hatred or the anxiety or any of this from this, because your feelings change. We want to deal with facts, but you see, the other side doesn't want to deal with the facts, because the facts does not support their narrative. The facts does not support the claim that they have, that there are people that are held back, that there are people that no matter what they do, they can't get ahead. And that's not what the facts tell us. If we start looking at some real facts, how can you take a population that makes up about 12%, just one portion of this population, 12% to 13%, I'll be liberal enough to tell you 15%. They make up that much of the population of the United States, but yet they commit over 50% of the crimes that we find in the United States. Now, you can't tell me that they're all crimes that are just false crimes that are just accused against them. I just overheard a man in a store talking about how his boss has told him to get his truck back to him because he had been out ripping people off. He'd been stealing from them. But I guess that's a false crime, something falsely reported there in this. But nevertheless, you see, it doesn't fit their narrative. And then, of course, they don't want to talk about how many black lives are taken by other black people. Probably 75% of the murders against black people are committed by other black people. But we don't talk about that. We can't talk about the facts there, because the facts get in the way of a narrative, and it doesn't get people emotional the way they want them to be emotional. And then, of course, you have things like Antifa there, where they can go out and commit all kinds of crimes. And then one I read today that I was just absolutely blown away by was this, I think it was in New York City, the officers were given poison milkshakes. They were actually poisoned by someone, and then they said there will be no charges filed. No charges filed. Now, if it's a crime for a police officer to kill someone, but yet someone tries to kill a police officer and it's not a crime. You see, we look at the double standard that's taking place here. We look at the foolishness that's taking place here. Why? Because there again, we're dealing with a secular society, with a secular culture that has no fixed morals. There's no absolutes. There's no law that applies to all of us in their worldview. Only place you're going to get that is the Bible. The only place you're going to get that is the Word of God. The only place you're going to find that is on the pages where God has said. And God has said that we are created in the image of God. And He says, thou shalt not kill, or thou shalt not murder. He's not talking about capital punishment. He's not talking about self-defense. He's talking about murder someone else. Premeditated, cold-blooded, straight out, I'm going to kill this person. we're not allowed to do that, and we are accountable to a creator. But you see, people don't want to be accountable today. They don't want to be responsible for their own actions. My intentions this evening had been to talk about how Christians need to learn to be accountable for their own lives, how they need to take responsibility for their choices and their actions, how they need to be responsible people, good citizens, also productive citizens, not only just working, but being a part of society, culture, as well as the upbringing and teaching of our children and of the next generation. Being involved in our politics and government, and yes, remaining pure and clean as you do that. So often we don't find Christians wanting to get involved. It's so sad today. We see the riots and the protests that are built on false narratives and an assumed racism that is not there. Where are the rest of the people? Where are the voices of reason? Why are we not coming together, standing shoulder to shoulder, saying this is what has happened? We ought to be doing that for our police officers. And I encourage you today, pray for those police officers in Atlanta. Pray that they are found not guilty. Pray that justice is truly done. And I know they'll get on TV and they'll say, well, what about the justice for Rayshard Brooks there? Well, what about it? Don't fight with the police officers. You got justice. You fought with the police. You went against the law. And guess what? The law won. Like it or lump it. And I want to tell you, not just people of color are victims of injustices. It happens to all kinds of people. Matter of fact, if you want to know the most targeted group in America, in this so-called Christian nation, the most targeted group is the Jews. They've always been a targeted group. And there's more hate crimes and assassination attempts and things that are perpetrated against Jews, but you don't hear that in the news. You want to know why? Because it doesn't fit the narrative, and because they don't seem to be disenfranchised or disparaged in any way. Why? Because they mostly come from two-parent households. They're well educated and do well financially. What about the Asians? There are those that are prejudiced against the Asians. They're actually more accepted in many schools than all other races because they put a high value on work and education and things such as that. And there are things done against them. Matter of fact, the system is rigged against them, because if it is a person of Asian descent, they are automatically taking like 200 points off of their SAT scores, and they are all automatically, so they've got to do better than everyone else. And yet you don't hear much about that. You don't hear any rioting or protesting or anything about that. Why? Because they don't seem to be disenfranchised. They don't meet a narrative. So the media can't use this. You know, if we really would turn off our televisions, quit watching the news, do you realize that probably about 75% to 95% of the world's problems would just go away? Because you wouldn't have anyone there stirring the pot. Anyone there causing the problem to fester and get worse, to repeat it over and over and giving you false narratives. So anytime you're reading the news, anytime you're listening to the news, and those that were with us Sunday morning know what I said about what you see in the news as a false narratives being basically being promoted by the liberal media. And I say all of this because I want you to understand something. Don't judge anything before it's time. Don't judge me. Don't judge this case in Atlanta. Don't judge the police officers, because the truth is eventually going to come out. The truth is going to come out about what Rayshard Brooks was, and he's not going to be the martyr that they proclaim that he is. He's not going to be the family man that they proclaim that he is. You're going to find out a criminal record probably, just like you did with the one in Minneapolis there, where the guy, he took a gun and he put it to a pregnant woman's belly. I think he even pistol whipped her with the gun while she was pregnant. But this is their martyr that they want to say, oh, the cops did this. Wait a minute. That guy was a dangerous person there. You see, when they call on the radio, they want to know who they're dealing with there. They want to know if they're dealing with a violent person, a person that's going to get out of hand with them. They always have to be on their guard, because why? When you kill a cop, there's not a whole lot said bad about it. It's supposed to be some kind of good thing. And they're the ones that are keeping the law and order. And it's going to be harder and harder to find police officers today, because they're not going to want to take the job, because not only is it too dangerous, but you're risking your whole livelihood because of a false narrative, something political there. And it's going to get worse as we go forward, unless people start banding together, Christians rise up, Christians be the voice of truth. We're not promoting racism, we're not promoting any kind of slavery or anything like that. We just think everyone ought to be responsible and accountable for their lives. You're responsible for the choices that you make. You're accountable for your actions. And, life is just not a bed of roses. There's an old song there. Maybe you ought to listen to it. And the lady says there, I beg your pardon. I never promised you a rose garden. And with a little rain, with a little sun, we got to take the rain sometimes as well. It comes along with it. It's not all nice and good and rosy. Life is a struggle for all of us here, and we all suffer injustices. And I just want to add this one little point on here, because I'm sick and tired of hearing about racism and slavery. And someone made this comment that I want to correct them on, because they said, nobody in this entire world today, or especially in America today, has ever seen a slave. I want to correct you on that, because there are slaves, but you won't hear anything mentioned about them, because there's too many people involved with them of all races. This is not just one race problem. And they're called sex slaves. And it's one that nobody wants to hear about. And yes, there are sex slaves right here in Central Georgia. There are sex slaves in Atlanta. Atlanta is a major hub for the international sex trade, and even for little children, and nobody wants to open their mouth. Nobody wants to say a word about that. You have some true slavery there. Where's all the liberal news media? Where are all you at? You want to jump on the bandwagon about slaves and slaveries and slave owners and all? Where are you at in all of this? Where are you at in a part of this? You're nowhere, because it doesn't fit your narrative there to get us moved over to socialism, to get the Democratic Party elected into office, to get everybody riled up there and all. And it just infuriates me, and I'm having to keep myself under control here, because when I heard those two officers were charged, it not only made me angry, but it kind of hurt, because you think about this and say, those guys were just doing their job, and they did it according to policy, and yet they're charged with murder. This is going to ruin their lives, their careers, their families, and nobody thinks about that. That's all okay. From a man that we're going to find out, I guarantee you, we're going to find out had a huge criminal record, and there was a reason he did what he did, because he knew the trouble that he was in, and yet he took advantage of a situation. And yes, it's very unfortunate he was shot, but those police officers had no idea what was going to take place if they did not get that man subdued there. And I think we ought to pray for them, and we ought to pray for our nation, and we ought to pray for some healing, and we ought to pray for some voices of reason in all of this. And, we really ought to turn to God is what we ought to do. And we ought to repent. We ought to understand that, there's not enough laws that can be made that's going to eradicate the evil in the heart of man. It takes Christ and Him alone. And I'm going to end it right there. So I hope to see you Sunday morning, Lord willing. And till we meet again, may God bless you.